So delighted to be joined by Brian Barry. We're going to preview this weekend's football action. Well, the championship got underway last weekend, Brian. It was a bit underwhelming for myself anyways, with sort of the big hammerings some teams took, and you'd hope maybe this weekend a shock might happen somewhere, or a big performance happens, and maybe Roscommon and Galway can be a good game. We might finally get the championship properly up and running.
Yeah, I was down in Killarney myself at the Kerry-Clare game last Saturday night, and as you mentioned, it was, especially for a team like Clare, who, had a good league campaign, knocked on the door of reaching Division 1. They would have fancied themselves against any team in the country, bar Dublin and Kerry, I think.
Yeah.
And they were obviously unlucky enough to draw one of them and ran into a Kerry team who were forearmed and forewarned, to the point that last November ensured they're not going to slip up, or they're not going to take the eye off the ball, or kind of have one eye on Dublin or anything like that. They very much, they're concentrating on the bread and butter this summer in terms of just getting out of Munster. That game probably summed up last weekend. There were a lot of one-sided matches. Donegal won handy enough against Down. Mayo did a number on Sligo. Limerick did a number on Waterford. Granted, they're two lower tier teams, but at the same time, there is the gap here. We're not going to get into a discussion here about structures, but there's the special congress at the end of the year, and I think there's an obvious answer staring the GAA delegates in their face in terms of the league championship based format, the league based championship format, I should say. So, this year might be the last of something like that. But for Clare or Sligo, somebody who would have backed themselves, maybe, we're up against a Mayo or a Kerry in the first round, we'd fancy our chances of a run at the back door, but
yeah,
it was a shot to nothing. Summer over. It's still the right decision just because of the year that's in it. We need club matches as the club championships up and running as soon as possible, so there's just not time for a back door this year, and it is the correct decision in my mind. But
yeah, well, we'll get straight into this weekend's action. There's a lot of hot favourites this week. I suppose the game that stands out is on Sunday, Roscommon and Galway in the height. And both teams coming on into this game on a flat sort of negative way. Lost in different circumstances to get relegated to Division 2. Obviously, Roscommon really poor against Armagh, lost convincingly. And Galway, on the other hand, seemed to have the job done against Monaghan, threw it away, got extra time, and even the last kick of the game, they lost it. So it's going to be an interesting one, and there's pressure on both teams in this one.
Yeah, I think more pressure on Galway, just purely because of the manner in which they threw it away, for want of a better term, against Monaghan. And that will have been more disappointing from a Galway point of view. I think they coming in, they would have liked to think of themselves as they'd finish in the top two in that group, and they were vying neck and neck with Kerry and Dublin, but they just they got cold on the first day against Kerry. They're not the only team who have got hammered by Kerry this summer, and they won't be the only. There'll be a few more, I suspect, over the coming weeks and months. But improved against the Dublin team, and they look like they're ready for a relegation. Did the job against Roscommon, but all of a sudden they look to be cruising with 10 odd minutes to go in normal time against Monaghan, and got caught cold. I don't think there's anything structural like that in terms of tactical or any gaping holes in their team that really caused that. I just think that was just a bit of naivety, a lack of big game experience in terms of just cool heads and shutting the game down and seeing out the game. And that just comes with experience. It's just a bit of an X factor. Sometimes teams just don't have that. But Padraig Joyce was absolutely bullying afterwards. He went straight for his car anyway. He bypassed the few journalists that were there that afternoon. Didn't give any, and I'd say he probably channeled that in training. I think that hammered into them. And maybe in a few weeks, when they're lifting the Nestor Cup or something, we'll be looking back and saying, they're in Division 2 next year, but that was a right shot in the arm for them, and it actually was the best thing to happen for their championship campaign. They're down Division 2. I don't think they're going to be somebody. You see teams who go down and sometimes they get stuck down there in Division 3, 2, and get stuck in a rut. I think Galway are good enough and have a decent enough panel strength and depth to be somebody like Mayo. We saw Tyrone and Donegal and a few other teams. Galway themselves were down, but teams who've just bounced straight back up with minimal fuss the last few years. So I think that'll be them next year. But looking forward just back to this weekend against Roscommon and the Hyde, I think that loss even though here hugely disappointing, big setback, I actually do think it will act as a shot in the arm to them.
Yeah, do you think Porrick Joyce coming in after Kevin Walsh? I think Kevin Walsh left fairly negatively with maybe the style of football, and it was talked about not to go away. Do you think Porrick Joyce just came in and he felt the pressure to play expansive football and please the Galway fans straight away?
Yes, is probably the simple answer. But you see that I suppose we're seeing the exact same thing with Fergal Logan and Brian Dooher in Tyrone at the moment as well. There's probably pressure on them to play a bit, and it worked. Look, the pandemic in footballing terms hasn't affected any team in the country as significantly in terms of the break of play as to Galway. They were flying in that league campaign. They were the talk of the country. They were almost a team to take down the Dubs and stop the 6 in a row if we rewind 15, 16 months. So hasn't really happened for them since. Obviously, they got that drubbing at the hands of Mayo. They finished the league quite poorly, and then obviously the Sligo game, they missed out in that last year, so they were straight into kind of final. And look, if it was this year's rule set, they might have won. They might have got a penalty with that Owen McLaughlin tackle late on.
Yeah.
And they might have been the ones in an All-Ireland final. So it was fine margins as well, but. Porrick Joyce has come in, he's made a few changes. Look, there's a few, guys who were, I suppose, firm favourites of Kevin Walsh. Perhaps he had a different defensive setup. Sean Andy O'Callaghan, I suppose, one of those guys is fallen out of favours. Sean Kelly and Sean Mulcairn are kind of backing up that full back line now for them. So he's made a few personnel changes. There's been a few guys coming in as well off that under-20 team last year. Tom O'Culhan came off the bench a few times in the league, and Matthew Tierney in midfield has played a starring role, to be honest. And he's a guy who can make an immediate impact, or looks like it this summer anyway, for sure.
Yeah, from a Roscommon point of view, probably from outside the county, obviously I'm from Roscommon. People will be saying, Roscommon have nothing to lose going to that. There's no real pressure on them. But I tell you, within the county, there's a lot of nearly negative energy, if you like, coming towards the team. And people aren't demanding a win, but if you refer back to that Mayo performance and the Hyde, that's nearly in the minds of everyone. You get another type of performance like that, like Anthony Cunningham's going to be under serious pressure.
Well, yeah, their team, it's not like they're a minnow here. They're not a Division 4 team coming in. They were Connacht champions 2 out of 3 years very, very recently. So, and it's more or less personnel-wise, it's more or less all the big players who helped with that are still very much to the forefront at the moment, I think for Roscommon, I'm harping back to the league, but I do think it's Gaelic football's best competition right now, because we had scores of games throughout all the divisions and nobody could pick any of them. You could, whereas we're going in, as you mentioned at the top of this discussion, we're going into a weekend now, and you could easily, without, you'd put your house on maybe 7 out of 8 or something along those lines. So it's, but yeah, no, I think for Roscommon, they've been the yo-yo team, the quintessential yo-yo team between Division 1 and Division 2. I think for that next step, I think even just confidence-wise, whenever and if they do get out of Connacht this year, or even going forward in terms of qualifiers or whatever structure it might take, they need to sustain and get up into Division 1 and stay there. But yeah, no, look, we all know the players they have, like the inside forwards of Diarmuid Murtagh, Conor Cox, Stoney Smith, all these guys. They have guys in the middle third who can actually mix it with the best of them, definitely in Connacht anyway. And the Smith, is as good as a middle third player as you have in Connacht right now. So he'd walk onto Galway or Mayo. I think going pound for pound, I think they'd fancy themselves, and of course all the dailies as well. So they have the players, they have everything like that. They're at home as well. And I think everybody's talking about Galway and saying, do you know what? Without Killian O'Connor this year, I think Galway might nick Connacht and everything. That's the perfect. They completely snared Mayo 2 years ago. Mayo won the league, and everybody was talking about them. They walk Connacht. They haven't done it for a good few years, and it was 5 years, I think, at that stage, or 4 years at that stage. And they went up to Castlebar and they won handy. So well, not quite handy, but they sprung a surprise. They've shocked Galway in Connacht finals the last few years, so there's no reason why they can't do it again.
Yeah, because it's interesting. The last 2 times Roscommon got relegated, they went on to win Connacht, and maybe that just shows playing Division 1 football, actually, even if though you're getting bet, it does improve you in the end, because you're playing them sort of bigger championship standard games, whereas in Division 2, we'll see with Mayo how they come into a Connacht final, where they're at. It's hard to know where they're at the moment, because they haven't really probably been tested. that if you do get the beatings, they can eventually work in your favour in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because we've seen that different teams react differently. As you mentioned, Roscommon have bounced back like just weeks after relegations. Even Mayo last year, to a certain degree, they went down and they went out to one Connacht, and they pushed Dublin hard in an All-Ireland final. Didn't seem to knock them for six at all. But then you see other teams who've relegated the last few years. Kildare, for instance, they got 7 moral victories in Division 1 in 2018. They lost every game by just a few points here or there, and they went out and they probably just forgot to win, and they lost to Carlow in the first round. Granted, they had a memorable backdoor run that summer, but so I'd say it probably just got them down that bit. But different teams react differently. But as I say, Roscommon, it's not their first relegation, and they've bounced back straight away the following years, getting straight back up from Division 2. So they know it's not the end of the world, and they know how to park a league relegation going straight into Championship.
Yeah, so if you had to predict this one, I think you, just by the way you were talking, you're going to lean towards Galway, is it?
I'd probably talk myself into Roscommon there, just the way I'll go with Galway, but I think it is. I think it's tight. I'll cop out. I'll fudge this answer, and I'll probably say about 60-40 Galway. I'll give, just purely because I think they'll get more out of their relegation playoff defeat than Roscommon did. In terms of Roscommon were well beaten by Armagh. Galway, they actually played some excellent football for the majority of normal time, but and that might just give them the shot in the arm to make sure they'll be ready for Roscommon this weekend.
Yeah, moving on. I mean, Leinster, there's a full house of quarterfinals this weekend. I mean, we can probably race through them fairly quick. The Dubs are back in action against Wexford. I mean, Wexford's prize for any championship game is to play Dublin. The Dubs just don't seem like they're slowing down. They cruised through that league campaign, won 3 and drew with Kerry. And yeah, they'll be there and thereabouts again for 7 in a row.
Yeah, well, I think there's only 2 talking points this weekend. First of all, is the fact that it's their first away game in Leinster, not neutral game now, and the fact that their opponents are at home since 2006. I think that's sad indictment of the Leinster Council over the last 15 odd years. So I think that has to be said. Granted, it's good that Wexford have been given home advantage, but I think it's criminal that any team in the country should have 15 years without having to play an away game in a competition structure that other teams play away games. That said, and the second is Stephen Cluxton. Is he going to be playing? Nobody knows. Stephen Cluxton isn't going to be a guy like Keane O'Sullivan there last weekend who put out a GPA statement and thanked the world and his wife. Cluxton is going to, maybe Cluxton has retired. We don't know whether he has or he hasn't. From what I've heard, his guys on the panel don't know whether he has or he hasn't. So, but if he is retired, we won't know. We mightn't even know. We mightn't feature this summer, and we might be going into an All-Ireland semi-final, and Desi is just saying, he's training away or whatever. So we won't know. And he's not going to. He's just going to slip and slide away. I think someone said there. I heard somebody saying on the radio a few weeks ago, making a comparison to Maurice Fitzgerald, never officially hung up his boots from Kerry. So as far as we know, he's still an active Kerry GAA player, but he's so Cluxton might be like that. And sure, look, he's been like that throughout his career. He's the opposite of an ego, so to speak. And he's come out with some very credible explanations in terms of why he's not hooping and hollering every time they win Sam Maguire. We heard that in terms of he doesn't like when he was on the losing end of that, other people celebrating in front of him, and maybe he's just very cognizant, which is extremely admirable. He's a notoriously private person and nobody's enforcing him to be like that, but it just throws up an interesting thing. Personally, I don't think he'll be there this weekend. I'm not saying he's retired or anything like that, but I don't think any of us know from the outside looking in. The Dublin camp has been notoriously watertight over the years, and I don't think we're going to get any leaks in terms of that. So we'll wait and see. But as we say, in terms of analysing a football game, unfortunately, Wexford got a big win, and it was their first win in 7 years in the Leinster Championship. This is bonus territory. It's immaterial. What do? Do you park the bus and lose by 15 points and get criticised for not having a go, or do you go out, have a lash, nothing to lose, and then you're a bit more open at the back and Dublin win by 25 points? It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But their season objective was to get out of Division 4. It didn't quite happen for them, but they did get a morale boost and championship win over a Wicklow team who'd beaten Cavan a few weeks beforehand. So I'd imagine it's just a shot to nothing if they lose by 30. So what? If they lose by 15, so what? They'll concentrate in 2022.
Yeah, because I mean, for a lot of these games, if you're looking at betting, you're looking at handicap betting. That's all you're looking here at, because again,
I think I saw on Twitter during the week there's a 25-point handicap, which is I'm not too sure now, was some sort of record anyway, be it for a Leinster game or some sort of any Gaelic football game anyway. But yeah, says it all really.
Yeah. I mean, you have Meath, Longford. I mean, Meath, they're on a bit of a negative, if you like, coming into this. There's not a lot of great sounds coming out of Meath at the moment. Longford had a couple of good wins against Tip to stay up, and then Carlow. So, I mean, you still expect Meath to win, but it could be a little banana skin for them.
Absolutely. Just when you mentioned Meath, I think, again, just unfortunately, if Meath and Kildare and teams like this, if they were in Connacht or they were in Ulster, they'd been talked up as dark horses for provincial title. And that's not going to happen this year. They'll be hoping to get through potential banana skins this weekend, and then just getting the rosary beads out that they'll avoid Dublin. But at the same time, what's better in terms of reflecting on 2020, the 2020 championship, and actually who finished on a more positive note? Was it Kildare who blew a half-time lead and lost narrowly to Meath, or was it Meath who got absolutely carved open by Dublin? So maybe sometimes you're probably better off, which is the sorry state of affairs. It's sad that we're having this conversation, but not just on Meath. It was the biggest game of the year for both Meath and Kildare in that game in Newbridge there a few weeks ago in the Division 2 semi-final, the promotion playoff, and Kildare came out on top. Meath, there was a lot of talk of them last winter. I think I was on your podcast talking them up before the Leinster final, in terms of saying they might live with Dublin somewhat, but they look to have benefited from Division 1. Okay, they got that bit of a lacing in the Leinster final on the bigger pitch of Croke Park compared to Parnell Park, where they played them a few weeks beforehand, and kind of given an adequate account of themselves. But yeah, there's still young players coming through. Jordan Flynn, there was so much talk about him last year. I think if they get by, Longford will be saying it's a Division 2 versus Division 3 team. If they lose, we'll be saying, they got cold, and Longford got the benefit of the win over Carlow. I must admit, I haven't seen anything of Longford this season, so I'm not properly in a position to comment on them, but on form, you think Meath should have enough.
Yeah, Kildare Offaly is kind of a similar game. Obviously, Offaly are a step ahead of Longford, and Kildare, based on that game, are a step ahead of Meath. And again, you'd probably say Kildare should be maybe 5, 6, 7 points better than Offaly. But again, Offaly are on the rise at the moment, and John Mahon's doing a very good job there.
Absolutely, yeah. They went to the well against Louth, and I think a lot of people are kind of echoing the sentiment. They're glad they won because they stuck their necks out and decided to play that Division 3 final. And there would have been commentary around it had they got caught by Louth, that had you not played it, then you would have still been on an upward trajectory. So fair play to them. They went out, they got to down Croke Park, which didn't work out for them against Derry, which maybe some people are suggesting. Maybe that shows they're not. Derry are probably realistically an upper end Division 2 team to where they're playing at the moment. So maybe if they hit that level, but at the same time they won't fear Kildare at all. Kildare have lost games they should be winning in Leinster the last few years. I already referenced that Carlow game a few years ago in 2018. So, but I saw Kildare twice during the league. I was down at the game in Thurles and got them on the GAA Go there one of the other days, and they're looking good under Jack O'Connor. Jimmy Hyland and Derek Irwin up front are really linking up well as a two-man inside full forward line. Daniel Flynn as well coming back this weekend. He was on fire in the early stages against Cork before he picked up an injury. So, but there's, as far as I'm aware, they picked up a good few injuries in that win over Meath. It wasn't without Paul Cribben. Looks like he's out for the summer as well. So, in terms of challenging Dublin, or not quite challenging Dublin, but in terms of putting up a decent showing against Dublin, those injuries might come in costly, but you'd fancy them to get past Offaly this weekend.
Yeah, the other game then is Laois Westmeath. Again, two teams that both went down, but probably Westmeath went down a bit better than Laois, if you like. Laois weren't really competitive in any of the games, and Westmeath put up a good showing against Cork. So they'll obviously don't want to get relegated, but they'll probably be coming in more confident than Laois.
Yeah, somewhat. Straight out. These two teams have been neck and neck the last few years, and arguably, like I suppose traditionally speaking, over the last few years, you would have said Meath and Kildare were probably the next best after Dublin and Leinster, but actually pound for pound, Laois and Westmeath. Laois made serious strides under John Suggery. We got back-to-back promotions. He got, they were one game shy of the Super 8s for 2 years in a row, so they were thereabouts, and they were punching above their weight, you might say, or certainly getting the most out of themselves. Westmeath as well, some exceptional footballers individually, guys like Kieran Martin and John Heslin, but they're again, these two teams actually, they both got drubbings at the hand of Dublin last winter, and maybe that caused a shadow over the start of their league campaign. Who can tell? But as I say, it's both going out for a game to win and getting back to winning ways for either of these teams. After a few losses during the league, 4 losses each, maybe just one win to click back into gear, and they'd suddenly fancy themselves against a Meath or a Kildare in a Leinster semi-final. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then up north you have Monaghan for Fermanagh. Again, you think Monaghan would be confident going into this Ulster Championship with the way they finished the league, but Monaghan are a team that just don't like being favourites. When you look over the years, they've lost to Fermanagh, they lost to Cavan last year, they lost to Down another year. They're almost a team that just don't like being hot favourites.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I was at both their defeats to Cavan in both 2019 and 2020.
Yeah.
They lost to, as you mentioned, Fermanagh out of nowhere, the game that caused Arlene Foster to come to an Ulster final in 2018. Down caught them on cold when they were coming nicely from the preliminary round in 2017, and they lost a qualifier game out of nowhere to Longford in 2016. Yeah. So they're a team that, perhaps the favourites tag don't suit. Obviously, always the big talking point over the last few years, are they over reliant on Conor McManus? And we've seen on days in the league the last few years, some guys step up, and we saw that again this year. Jack McCarron had a super game against Galway. Conor McCarthy stuck in a few goals. Was it against Donegal? And Micheál Bannigan is, looking a bit more assured than that in the senior grade as well. Perhaps he's put on a bit more muscle or a bit more weight. So these guys are coming in, and they're actually, they're there to help Conor McManus. And then all of a sudden, when you're lining up against them and you have more forward threats to worry about, all of a sudden there's a few more guys. But as we said, I think they should have enough for Fermanagh this weekend, but that comes with a warning shot, because we've certainly said that a good few times, that Monaghan should have enough for Ulster opposition the last few years, and they've fallen flat on their face. But they're on the other side of the draw to Donegal, Tyrone, and the formed Derry team. So both themselves and Armagh, who we're going to discuss in a bit, are certainly should fancy themselves at the very least to reach an Ulster final.
Yeah, because Armagh are a team people are talking about, like a bit like with Derry. Armagh had a good league. They bet Monaghan. They lost to Tyrone, but could have easily won. I remember Stephen Campbell missed a penalty to maybe put them 4 or 5 up going into the last 15 minutes. And they drew with Donegal, and obviously they comfortably dispatched the Roscommon there by 9 points. And Antrim have had a really good year in their own right, getting out to Division 4. That's big for Antrim football, and they're a county that you'd like to see, get back to maybe play high Division 3, Division 2 football, but you'd have to think Armagh should have a comfortable day.
You should mention at the top of the show here, teams like Clare, who would have, benefited from a backdoor. And the McGinley has seemed to get a bit of feel-good factor back around Antrim football, but Armagh were very impressive during the league, and they didn't, compared them to Derry. Granted, Derry did in Division 3. Armagh looked at home in against Division 1 teams, and they weren't out of their depth in any games. And okay, they were probably unlucky in many regards to finish in the bottom 2 rather than reach a semi-final in that group, but they weren't a team who were going to get caught cold then, like Galway in a relegation playoff. They went out and they really did a job. I think what's been most striking is, now I'm not too sure whether you could attribute this to Kieran Donaghy, but their forward play straight away. Guys, it's been too often that Armagh on paper, they look very silky, but it's only one day, it's Gemma Hall one day, or it's Stephen Campbell the other, or Rian O'Neill the other, or Oisin O'Neill the other, and then they all go quiet, or, so it's only one guy in each day, but they really seem to be playing together. And, Jerry Oak Burns, he's a guy who's only getting better and better. They look like a team who could actually make a step up and stay up in Division 1 for a few years. And look, as we said, I personally think the Ulster team, the standards has dropped a bit in terms of just the top Ulster teams have fallen that bit behind the Dublin and Kerry at the moment. But that means Donegal and Tyrone, they're a bit closer to the pack in terms of Monaghan and Armagh. That may be next tier of Ulster teams, and they'll certainly be fancying their chances in-house anyway of winning an Ulster title. So first since 2008, I think, off the top of my head. So I was really impressed with them in the league, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to wrap up, I mean, you can probably predict, I mean, Leinster and Munster are probably write-offs, but if I had to put you on the spot to maybe predict the Connacht winners and the Ulster winners, who would you be going for?
I think it's in vogue to tip Galway just because Mayo are lacking Cillian O'Connor. I think we saw a bit from Darren McHale last weekend, a bit more from Ryan O'Donoghue. To suggest that I think Mayo might just have enough to retain the Nestor Cup. So I'd go with Mayo, especially the way they're warming up nicely. You know, they have a few games against Sligo and against Leitrim now next up, where they can work with a few solutions and try out a few solutions without Cillian O'Connor. And obviously without Dermot O'Connor as well. It looks like he'll be missing for the next few weeks as well. So I'll go with Mayo. Yeah,
and then Ulster, it's probably the most open it's been for a while.
I think Donegal will get caught. I do. Be it Derry, be it Tyrone, be it Monaghan or Armagh in the final. So I don't think I think it's just too hard a road that might wear them down. To be honest with you, I'm not. So I fancy whoever will come out from Monaghan or Armagh. I think they'll win the Ulster Championship just surely. I think Kerry provided a blueprint for other teams in terms of how to go after Tyrone, so it might come a bit soon for them in terms of their development. So Armagh or Monaghan are coming in on a high note after very decent league campaigns for the two teams. So whoever, that's granted if they get over their respective opponents this weekend, if they go into an Ulster semi-final, I'd fancy the winner of that to get through.
Brilliant, Brian. Well, hopefully the championship might get up and running and Roscommon win on Sunday would really top it off.
Absolutely. Cheers, Darrell.